G'day there, you're watching the Aussie BIM Guru, and today we're going to run through how to update title block parameters using Dynamo. So this is quite an important technique I find to save a lot of time in sheet sets. So on a previous video we set up scope boxes and key plans so that we can communicate to our client which zone of a plan they're looking at when we divide it into smaller pieces. So we've got our scope boxes there, so we made 6 scope boxes on the advanced architectural model, and we split up the views and used Dynamo in order to set up sheet sets. And we generated a small little key plan, which is basically just a generic annotation, and we're placing them just on our sheets loosely at the moment. You could nest it into your title block if you wanted to. I'm going to show you both workflows in this video of how to manipulate the data. And essentially the way that it worked is that you basically specified which number of zone you wanted, and it would highlight the respective filled region in the key plan to suit. So from here, there's a bit of a manual workflow to update these key plans, which is how I used to do it before I used Dynamo, which is to copy the key plans to all sheets that need them, open each of those sheets, observe the key plan zone that you need to set, and then you select the key plan and set it manually, times the number of sheets you have. Obviously there's certain shortcuts you can take, such as setting up the key plan for zone 1 and copying it to all sheets that are zone 1, then doing the same for each other zone. It's still manual though, and there's still a lot of room for error as well. I used to sometimes just get the wrong key plan because I was doing 300 sheets and you'd make a mistake eventually because it was just so boring. So today I'm going to use Dynamo instead in order to read the sheet data and push that data into the key plan, and we're also going to look at another workflow too. So Dynamo to the rescue. So the first script we're going to use is a little bit basic. It's going to use a different example, which is going to be a nested scale bar in our title block. And the problem with nested components and title blocks is that they can't be connected to data that comes out of the sheet in the project level. So one of those parameters that you can't utilize, which would be great too, is the scale of the view that's on the sheet. But unfortunately that data is not available in nested annotations. So what we have to do with our scale bars usually is we have to specify in the title blocks properties what scale the views on the sheet are at, which is obviously a manual workflow, so it's not great. So we're going to filter down a sheet set in Dynamo, and we're going to get all the annotations on that sheet. Well, we're going to get a specific type of annotation. In this case, it's going to be the title block itself, which is treated as an annotation by Dynamo, and we're going to set the scale property manually to that entire set of sheets, because otherwise you have to visit each sheet one by one. The second script we'll look at is going to be a more advanced version of this. So the second version is going to be getting all the key plans and finding out which sheet they're on. And we're going to check the first view on that sheet for which scope box is applied to it. We're going to get the number of that scope box through some basic language processing, and then we're going to set the key plan number to suit that sheet. So these are going to be really simple scripts, but really helpful. So without further ado, we'll jump in. We're using Steam nodes today for one view, just to get the views on sheets. Really helpful node. And we're also using Dynamo 2.0.3 at the moment. So let's get started. So this is my project from before. So you recall that we had about 18 sheets with different zones on each of them. And we had to place a key plan on there. So the key plan, if you haven't seen it, basically you just type in the zone number and you'll see that it hides all but one filled region for which respective zone we're in. So you can see here we're in zone 1 of the overall plan. So we need to find a way to manually, to automatically set that using Dynamo. What I'm going to do first is add a scale bar to my title block. So I've got a little scale bar family here. The way that it works is it just has a whole bunch of formulas that are driven by a scale factor. So you tell it what scale it is, and basically we have incremental values that on a sheet scale to 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 millimeters. So it's a really handy little family. I usually nest that in title blocks, and you can nest a key plan as well, but today we're not going to. So we're just going to place one of those on our title block. So we'll just chuck it down here, and basically the way it works is in its type properties. You can obviously change this to 1 to 50 here, but the good thing about type properties in a non-shared family is you can nest instance parameters into the type parameters. So we're going to nest a parameter called scale. We're going to do instance parameter, and then we're going to load into our project and overwrite. So we should gain this little scale bar on all our title blocks now. And if I tell this sheet it's 1 to 50, I have to go down here and tell the title block 50, and you'll see that everything updates to match the scale factor. Obviously a real drag because we have a whole bunch of sheets that aren't actually at 1 to 100. By default, it defaults to 100 because that's the most common scale that we tend to work with. But we want to make these all 50. Now, obviously I can go select all an entire project and say 50, but imagine if you're on a project that has 10 different scales across the project and it's got 2,000 sheets. You're not going to want to go and do a select all because you're going to undo a lot of information. So we need to find a way to do this via Dynamo. So let's just boot up Dynamo and we're just going to get started. So we're going to first have to get our family type. So I'll just get my reference up. So we need to get family types and find our title block. So in this case, I've got A0 metric as my title block. I'll just set my running to manual and I'll just do a quick save as. Okay, so what we need to do is find all the family instances of that family type. Note that this is going to find every single one in the entire project. So we're not going to want to deal with every single one of these. So we're going to get family instance by family type. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to find out what sheet it's on. So for this we can use element view, which is really handy because Dynamo sees sheets the same way that it sees views. So you can use a lot of nodes that deal with view the same way you can with sheets. So we're looking for one called view. This is actually from Orchid. Sorry, I missed that this one wasn't actually an out-of-the-box node. So you'll need Orchid as well for this node, but this is an extremely helpful node, so I highly recommend downloading Orchid. But essentially we should end up with a list of all the sheets that contain that title block, and then the title blocks themselves. So we're just going to take this off here at this point, and we need to filter out which sheets we don't want to do things to. So in this case, we're not going to want to deal with these first 3 sheets. So we're going to make a parameter special. So what I do sometimes when I'm dealing with a set of elements in Revit using Dynamo, I'll sort of flag them for editing. So I'll pick a parameter that I'm not using, such as sheet issue date, and I'll override it with a value that Dynamo can find, so I can filter out these sheets. So let's just call this temporary. And you can see for these first 3 sheets, I'm just setting it as a date. Obviously, maybe sheet issue date isn't a good one for you because maybe your company uses sheet issue date, but because we use revisions, we don't tend to use sheet issue date because it's just a manual field that doesn't achieve anything, for us at least. So up to you which one you use, but ideally we're going to want to get that parameter value by name of that respective sheet. So we're going to get the sheet and we're going to check the value in this case for sheet issue date. So we're going to get a string and get the sheet issue date. And this should give us a list of the values, and you'll see that some of them are dates and some are temporary. So we want the ones that contain temporary. So we're going to do a check using an equals node and say, does this equal, and we'll get a string. And as you can guess, we're looking for temporary. Obviously these can be inputs in Dynamo Player as well, so maybe you might want to set inputs as you go. Today I'm just going to run out of Revit, but if you were doing Dynamo Player, I suggest using the title block or the element type, the parameter value, the parameter value, and then there'll be a value at the end that we set. But essentially what this should do is build up a list of trues and falses that we can use a filter by boolean mask, my favorite node, to filter out. So essentially we're going to want to get our sheets. So we're going to filter our sheets by that mask. This is a really common workflow in Dynamo, getting some data about an element and filtering it based on its parameter values to reduce the number of elements you're dealing with. Because now our in list is the sheets we care about and our out list is the sheets we don't. What we're also going to need to do is we're going to need to filter, actually we don't really need our sheets at that point technically, we really just need to filter our title blocks because that's what we're manipulating. So actually we'll filter our title blocks by the sheet's value. So we're getting another element, getting the value of the element and filtering the original elements by their host element, which is quite an interesting workflow. At this point you may have, let's say you have 2 title blocks on a sheet, which is obviously a little bit crazy. I guess you could run like a unique items list through here if you want to, but probably not necessary. It's still filtering sheets, which is quite interesting. I'll just do a quick reset of that. Okay, I'll make a new boolean mask list. Sometimes nodes in Dynamo hold on to values longer than you tell them to. Notice how it's still holding on to sheets despite the fact there's no list connected there. Quite strange. if I make a fresh one, it should reset, and there we go, we get our title blocks. So I guess this should be a single instance. If you were dealing with something like a sheet, so updating sheet properties based on something, run a unique items list through the end so you don't set the parameter twice, because this will give you every single instance of that occurrence, if that makes sense. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is set the parameter of that respective element that we've isolated by name. So we're going to set, in this case, the parameter scale, and we're going to be setting it to 50. So scale, and in this case, it's a number field, so we need to set a number, which is 50. And obviously these could be your other inputs, the element parameter and the parameter value. So at this point, if we run this, we should hopefully just update all those sheets to 1 to 50. So I've just run that, and there you go. You can see that now this has been populated to 1 to 50. However, if I go to one of my sheets I didn't pick, 1 to 100, there you go. So that's how you can manipulate title block parameters. Obviously, that's quite a basic script. We're going to do one that's slightly more complicated by processing the scope box of a view on a sheet that a key plan is on. So this is going to be a more complex script. This one's really helpful. I use this one all the time to set key plans, because nearly every project I use has key plans. So we're just going to make a new script again. We're just going to jump back into our project, and what we'll do is take our key plan, copy it, and go paste to selected views. And we're going to put them on every single sheet. So now every sheet in our project should have a key plan, but obviously the values are wrong. They're all just set to 1 at the moment. So we're going to want to fix that using Dynamo. So if we start off again with our family types, and in this case, we're going to get our key plan instead. So I'll just search for key plan. We're going to want all instances of that family type. So I'll just have to find that node. I find this node can be a little bit tricky to find in the browser sometimes by family type. You sort of learn certain keywords that nodes will appear for when you search for them over time. So what we're going to want to do then is get our sheet. So we're going to use that node from Orchid, element view. Actually, I'll just hunt for it again. I think when you're searching for custom nodes, you can type in the host package and it will filter down as well. See there, I added the word Orchid and it found it much faster. So we're going to go get viewports. We'll get views. This is from Steam nodes, so you can filter it by Steam as well. We don't want to get viewports. We want to get views and viewports. Get views Steam. Okay. Let's just do get views and viewports. It's from Rhythm. Man, I've really mucked up my custom nodes today. So not actually from Steam nodes, this one's from Rhythm. Sorry about that. So yeah, you'll need Rhythm instead, which is also quite a common package. Okay, so at this point, we've got all our key plans, all the sheets they're on, and we're getting all the views on those sheets, because we're gonna have to get the first view and identify its scope box. So at that point, we're gonna be getting the first view from each sublist. So we're going to get item at index, and we're going to take our views list, which is going to be full of sublists to create all the views on that sheet. So there could be more than one. We just want to get the first view, because typically the first view on a sheet is going to be the first view someone placed there, which is usually their floor plan with a scope box. It's up to you how you process this part of your script, but we're going to be working at level 2. And the reason we're doing that, you may not see it now because I think they only have one view on each sheet. But see how each of these is a sublist? So we want to get the first item from each sublist at level 2. So that's why we're using levels. I've had a few people ask about levels in the background and say, why are you using this? So I'll try and explain levels whenever I use them in future. Okay, so what we need to do now is get the parameter value by name for the scope box on that view. Because scope box is stored as a parameter in view properties called scope box. And that will return the element that is applied, if there is one. So now if I run that, you'll see that we've got the respective scope box for each of those. Now, let's say one of these didn't have a scope box applied to it. You wouldn't want to set the key plan in this case. So let's just set the scope box for this to none instead. And just rerun our script. Okay, I might need to refresh this node. A lot of custom nodes need a lot of refreshing, like they need to be rebuilt or re-added if you're running in a single session of Dynamo. Now this should pick up the change I made. But ideally we should see a row called none. There you go. So you can see this is none now, so this has no scope box. So what we want to do is process out those particular nodes. So we're just going to get an equals node. And we're going to say, does this equal none? Because none is returned as a string in this case. Okay, and we should see a true. Conversely, you could do a not equals node. It just depends which side of a Boolean mask you want to filter from. So we're going to filter by Boolean mask, and we're going to remove those particular elements by using our out list. Okay, so that should leave us with all the views that do actually have a scope box. But what you also need to do is you also need to filter your key plans as well, because we need to keep the same order of key plans. So we're going to filter that as well, just to manage out the key plans that don't have a scope box associated to their view. There you go. Cool. So from there, we need to get the name of our scope box, and we're just going to do a little bit of language processing to find the actual scope box number. So we're going to go take our out lists, and obviously we can't feed this into our key plan yet, because our key plans are expecting a number. So what we need to do is isolate the number on the end of your scope box name. You might have different syntax for your scope box, so it just depends how you need to break up that string to find the number. In this case, we're going to get the last index of a space. So we're going to go last index in that string, and we're searching for space, and we're going to ignore case. And this should tell us where that space before the last number occurs. And there you go, you can see in this case it's always at 4. But you can imagine if you had like a zone 13, zone 14, or subzone 48, you know, obviously there's different lengths of string that you have to process there. So it's good to keep that in mind. Okay, so we're going to build a little code block here. We're just going to have index, we're going to count 0 because we're going to start at the start of the string, and we're going to remove everything from that index plus 1. So we're going to feed in the index to this, and we're going to be using string remove to remove characters from that string. So we're going to take our element name, and I'll just move this stuff down. So from this index plus 1, from index 0, the first index, and plus 1, we're going to remove that. And we should be left with a list of numbers, but they're not numbers, they're actually strings. So we need to convert this to a number, because our zone plan will be expecting a number. So it is string to number. And now we should have numbers ready to feed into our key plans. And all we have to do from there is set parameter by name. So we're working similarly to our previous script. We're taking a whole bunch of elements, finding out the properties of the sheet that they're on, and then we're manipulating some data in order to give them their value that they should receive. So we're going to get our value and our parameter name. In this case, I'll just cross-check what it's called. I think it's called zone highlight. So this is the parameter in your key plan that controls the zone that's being highlighted as a number. Okay, so if we run this one, this should update. So at the moment, all the key plans are set to this zone. What I might do is I'll just update. Actually, I won't bother adding this one again because it's already got its key plan correctly. But let's go to zone 2. Obviously, zone 2 is not correct at the moment. So we're going to use this Dynamo script. I'll just refresh it just in case. So I'll just reopen it. And we'll run the script. And we should expect all our key plans to be updated. And this could be thousands of views. It doesn't just have to be 18. And there you go. You can see it's set all the parameters of our key plans. And there you go. Zone 2. We got zone 3. Zone 4. Zone 5. And zone 6. So there's a lot of use for this type of script. You could update north points. You could detect views that are at certain rotations by getting their angle to true north and find out what their north point should be pointing to. So there's a lot of applications for this type of script. So hopefully this helps show you how you can set up a sheet set using scope boxes and then manipulate the data on the sheets to communicate to your client or whoever's reading the drawing which zone they're looking at without doing a lot of manual work in the meantime. So that's pretty much all for today. So hopefully that helps sort of conclude that workflow in the last couple of videos I've released. Thanks for watching today. If you're not already following and subscribing, feel free to do so. I release videos 3 times a week. Feel free to leave any comments or feedback down below. Always happy to take on video requests if you have any, and I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. So thanks for watching today, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.